Hitting revenue targets is hard and requires constant hustle. Last quarter's success is already forgotten. Learn the mindset and tactics of today's most successful revenue producers in B2B marketing and sales. We call this the revenue hustle. I'm your host, Tom Hessen, navigating you on this journey. Today's show is sponsored by 9 Lenses, an interactive assessment platform that enables you to add instant value to your buyers and allows your sales team to tailor business conversations focused on the pain points each and every time. Check them out at 9lenses.com.
Hi, this is your guest, Tom Hessen of the Revenue Hustle, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome our next guest, Rebecca Grimes. Rebecca, welcome to the Revenue Hustle.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
It's going to be a wonderful conversation. I've gotten to know Rebecca over the past few weeks, and she has a very interesting story. She's currently the Chief Revenue Officer at a company called Ruby, and she's had a very diverse background covering both B2B marketing and sales, which you'll see as a theme in our conversation today. Rebecca, give a little intro to the audience.
Fantastic. So my team, we affectionately call the revenue team, and we are responsible for the entire customer journey, all the way from lead acquisition through the sales and onboarding process, all the way through ongoing service support and retention of our customers. So real quick background on Ruby. We are a live virtual receptionist and chat services company that works with over 13,000 small business owners to make meaningful connections with their most important asset, their customers. I joined Ruby in January of 2020, yes, right before the pandemic, and have been leading our 100-plus person revenue team remotely from Chicago ever since.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so yes, I know Ruby, and you started there as the Chief Marketing Officer, right? And then you've now moved into the CRO role. So that's, again, very cool. And Ruby's a very successful company, for those that are not familiar with it. So I would highly encourage you to check it out. Rebecca, you know how we do this. We do these revenue rules where you come in, share some wisdom. So go ahead, give us your first revenue rule.
Marketers can run sales organizations. So
wow.
I know that this might be a little controversial, but let me explain what that means. It definitely doesn't negate having strong sales leadership inside an organization, which I do have at Ruby. But what it does is it breaks down a lot of the barriers to achieving revenue targets that happen in many organizations. I think we all have experienced unhealthy friction between sales and marketing. I think it's just expected that's the norm. But I'm a believer that it doesn't have to be. At Ruby, we've created an environment that is collaborative and grounded in how do we win together. And, I would even double down to say that I'm a better marketer because I've been on the receiving end of leads from marketing in a sales role. And so I think, can sales run marketing? Maybe, but I think marketers are set up to more successfully run sales organizations, especially if they uniquely have put themselves in the sales role because of the way that we understand how all of the mechanics contribute to a successful machine. So, with my current role, owning the leadership, of marketing plus sales, plus RevOps, plus partnerships, and then customer success, we get to align our KPIs across our entire revenue accountable leadership team. And those translate all the way down into, OKRs for the next level of leadership. And they work very collaboratively and closely together.
Well, there's a lot mentioned on LinkedIn. I love this topic because I think I have worked with CROs that are sales leaders that try to do marketing, right? I think, you tell me, do you think most CROs are coming from a sales background or a marketing background? I would say sales in my
experience. Today, sales. Yep, I think today, it over indexes on sales. And I do think that, from an outsider that is not a marketer leaning in, that might be an obvious choice. And I think, there are plenty of examples of successful sales leaders that have taken on marketing as a core function of their responsibility. Where I think that misstep happens is when there is just an over index on quantity of leads. Just give me better and more leads. without really understanding what channel diversification looks like, with understanding conversion of the funnel, how to drive engagement and awareness of the brand. Those are often things that are missed when sales leaders run marketing and they don't have experience actually understanding how to successfully build a brand and a go-to-market strategy at the same time.
And so it does seem natural to put a sales leader into that role, just because, if you think I got to grow my sales, who better than my sales leader? And to eliminate the friction, we'll just elevate the sales leader and run, put them over the top of marketing. How come you think marketing isn't more thought of as a leader in marketing can run sales? Like it just seems so foreign to most. And you see it on LinkedIn, like there's more conversations today happening about marketing could run sales, and you start to see some of that out there. But I'm kind of curious from your perspective, why do you think they aren't given as many opportunities?
Yeah, I think it's unusual that people, with my experience, have worn both sales and marketing hats and built BDR functions and SDR functions from the ground up, and really challenged kind of the conventional norm of the way that that growth can happen. And so I think that first and foremost, I would challenge all marketers to go on the other side of the aisle and spend some time in sales and listen to the way that the materials that you are delivering, the quality of the leads that you think you have, are translating into actual results for the sales organization. And so I think, that changed me. That experience of, moving out of a machine that I had built and, I'm delivering all of these leads. I don't know why we're not getting the momentum that I believe we're capable of doing, going into that sales organization and sitting alongside the sales team and building out functions and really participating in those sales conversations. There was a mismatch in terms of the way that we were marketing the business and the way that sales needed to market the business to get to successful outcomes. And so it's nuanced, but I do think that there was a light switch, that a moment that I had that was helping me better understand. Marketers work alongside sales most of their lives, and it's not unusual to participate and observe sales conversations, but really deeply understanding sales process and methodology and the stages and the content that needs to support each of those stages and the different buyers in that cycle. It is something that sales intimately understands, but they don't necessarily, on the flip side, understand all of the marketing work that goes into maintaining a brand position, all of the nuances in the different channels that are now available today. It is a completely different landscape, even in the last 5 years, in the way that sales happens. And so I think that that's why we're not seeing more marketers, yet lean into CRO roles, but I would encourage to get very close, if not embed yourself inside the sales organization and the culture, if you desire to run all of revenue someday.
And what made you want to go from your established marketing career to be in sales? So you weren't just like a marketer, riding shotgun with the sales team. You dropped in, right? Like you were in.
I did.
Team, right? You were running. So why?
I was.
What made you do that?
I think it was, largely grounded in the fact that, I had spent the previous 2 years really just focused on building this velocity of a machine on the demand and the brand side of the business. And we hadn't quite clipped off and started achieving the momentum that I thought we should be having, given our market leadership position, our lead quality, the customers that we were working with and signing up, and the references that we were providing. And I saw this sales organization, continue to churn itself out, either voluntarily or involuntarily. And I said, I have to go figure out what's happening over there. All from the observation from the outside, this should be a well-oiled machine, both with sales and marketing, and it wasn't. And what I would then discover is that the leads that we were sending over we were too generous with our lead scoring, and they actually needed to be nurtured further along before we passed them on to the sales organization. We also didn't have an outbound sales strategy at the time. And so we really need to think about what our TAM look like, and then building a targeted account list for each one of the sales team members so that they could proactively, before account-based marketing, came, a coined terminology, but we were essentially doing account-based marketing. Who are the most likely customers that we should be working with, and how do we come at it from a marketing perspective, and then also from an outbound perspective from sales? So follow them around digitally, but also proactively engage with them on why they should consider working with us. And it wasn't that, again, that, I'm now immersed in this, I'm the one sitting in and navigating, oh, there's this new buyer that we hadn't planned for, nor had we created content for, that could be a pretty big barrier to us getting this deal across the finish line. How do we engage with them? And the relationship building that happens in the sales organization. And it's not as programmatic as you can see in a dashboard of, these are the leads, and this is the quality of the leads, and these are the logos that we're turning over to the sales team. That was only a small fraction of the story. And until I sat in on the other side and took those leads and really tried to work them and understood they weren't ready for sales yet, they needed to be, they weren't sales qualified. They needed to be worked, more to pull them from top of funnel down by the marketing organization, and really calibration of that process didn't happen until I went and moved over into the sales organization.
Wow. So I assume you got some newfound empathy for your colleagues in sales, right? Because again, there's sometimes a misunderstanding of what each other's job does from marketing to sales.
The heartbreak of losing a deal that you've worked for 6 months, it's devastating. And there was one account that we worked and lost it twice, and it felt like a breakup. I was like, I know your children's names and birthdays, and how did we get here? And so I think that we didn't account for in the marketing organization the level of intimacy that actually goes into, at the time, enterprise selling and multi-year contracts, but the investment that you have to make in EQ along the IQ when you're going through a sales process. And so how did we do that in a way that was meant to build hero status for those folks that we were trying to bring along the journey of, becoming customers of ours? And that's a very different marketing approach when you think about it. Like, it isn't just like, here are the KPIs and stats, and here's the ROI that we've achieved for other customers. It's intimately understanding, what are you challenged and faced with, and how do I get you promoted by choosing us as your vendor? And that's a completely different way to think about how you support a sales organization. And I never would have gotten there, or it would have probably taken way longer if I hadn't gone and just immersed myself in that culture.
Wow, that's fascinating. And I imagine, I am a sales guy at heart, and I am not a marketer. I dabble in it from time to time, but I've gotten a great appreciation for how many different jobs there are in marketing. Right. To me, like in sales, you run the same process over and over and over again. Obviously, each deal is different, each buyer is different, but you have a set number of skills in sales, in my opinion. Where in marketing, you have a plethora of roles, each with their own unique skill set, right? Especially as the marketing team grows, and it's almost impossible for a marketer to do all things today, right? I'm just kind of curious from your perspective, like coming from sales now back into marketing. To me, that's how I see marketing, is just, it takes a small army to do it well, because there's just so many different roles and skills.
It does. And honestly, the challenge with marketing, quite honestly, is there are new market entrants, there are new product releases. And so, you have to have folks in your organization that are working on product marketing and demand gen and partnerships and customer marketing. That is a critical overlooked function in many marketing organizations. Is actually, everybody knows this, it is much easier and cost efficient to retain customers than it is to replace them. And it is It's often a function that you have to fight for, and it is under-resourced, not only just in talent, but in the programs needed to support the retention and expansion strategy. And so, the nuances of the way that marketers have to, wear lots of hats, but also the ROI conversation is incredibly challenging when you're putting dollars into brand activities. It's this double-edged sword of, I want to be the market category leader, but I also need leads to be delivered, and those are two different strategies for your marketing team to execute on. Thought leadership, brand awareness, actually creating content for consumption that might not have a direct response element to it, ungating content so that it is consumed without you actually capturing a lead, is really challenging for most organizations to wrap their brain around. Wait, we're going to build a very valuable asset and we're just going to give it away, and we're not going to know who's actually consuming that content, and we've got no way to go to them. Yes, because what happens, as we all know, is they consume that content and they have an aha moment, either in that consumption of the content or at a later stage, and say, I need that service or I need that product. And so as much as I would like to, think that marketing can force moments of consideration to happen, we can't. I think that with all of the FOMO content and direct response goals that you have, there is an element of, is this the right time for me to be making this buying decision? That ultimately is the challenge, and the collaboration between sales and marketing when they're working towards a common goal of deeply understanding that. And I'm so fortunate that Ruby has a product and service that we know that we create different outcomes for small businesses when they use our services. And so it is with passion that our teams follow up when we do have customers that want to learn more about Ruby and share their information, because we know that it is game changing for them when they start using Ruby services. And I think that's also, I would encourage marketers and sales professionals alike to actually love and believe in the product or service that you are selling. Because when you do that, when you come to the table with, I'm not just trying to accomplish a sales or hit a target, coming from a place of, I genuinely believe that you will achieve a new level of success with us than without us, that's really special. And I don't take my word for it, but like the customer love that we receive every single day is, I wish I found you sooner. That's the thing that keeps me up at night, is how do we with a megaphone help small businesses understand that services exist that can take a heavy weight off of their plate. They're the CEO of everything. They're the heartbeat of our communities, and build thriving diverse communities. When small businesses, and especially during the pandemic, when we've watched with heartbreak so many of our favorite places unfortunately not survive, but also a ton of new small businesses open up. When you believe in what you're doing, it actually changes your success criteria and helps you better market and sell your products and services.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think that's really, really valuable. And so as we think about your role starting at Ruby as a CMO, I think it was your first role at Ruby, if I have that right. So how did the conversation, was there a CRO prior to you, or did that role get created and you moved into? Like, just talk a little bit about the transition. How did that come about? And then I'd love to get your perspective on, once you're there and you're there now, how do you operate marketing and sales with all the background context that you just shared about your history?
Yeah. So I stepped in with the title of Chief Marketing Officer, but I was essentially responsible for the sales, the new revenue engine, and so that included sales and marketing and partnerships and operations at the time. And so it was a role that my predecessor was in, and I am usually somebody who comes in as a change agent. I I'm brought in to scale businesses. I do assessments of where we're at today, where we're trying to get to tomorrow, and understand operationally what are the gaps that we potentially have to getting that done. And so, so my first year at Ruby was really, working with the team, building out new functions, putting, people in different roles and bringing in new talent into the organization to really set us up for where we were headed, and changing internal operational processes that had been in place for years. And so, doing all of those mechanics was really about an assessment of, where are we at today? What is our baseline, and what is the foundation that we need to get to where we're headed? And then, the pandemic hit about a month after I joined, and it became even more critical for us to double down on culture. And, there was some kismet that happened where we now started hiring remote employees, where, traditionally we were, in our locales where we had office space as our primary hiring locations. And so when we started thinking just about opening, the opportunity for sales and marketing professionals to join us from across the country. And once I stabilized and got us to a place from a marketing and a sales perspective where we understood where we were headed, and the people were starting to get hired to do what we needed to do, the other missing piece of it was customer marketing. And so we brought in a customer marketing leader, and we built out her team, and then supported that with, what does a 30, 60, 90-day customer journey look like? And as we did that, I got closer to the customer success organization. And there were some bumps, similar to bumps you feel between sales and marketing teams. There were some bumps in terms of process handoff and collaboration and data sharing. And so about a year into my tenure, it made sense to collapse under a single revenue team, both new, returning, and while I had indirect responsibility, obviously, for retention, aligning that entire team so that there is a revenue target that we are all accountable for, and then that operationally breaks down into retention, expansion, cross-sell, upsell, new customer acquisition. And so so that happened about a year ago, and I can honestly say that like magic happened then. So it wasn't just here are the numbers that we have. It's okay, something is there's some noise that's happening in the market, and our leads have softened this month. How do we still hit that revenue target? What are the other levers that we have across our responsible teams to close that gap? And when you do that, like when you're on these shared KPIs, if this is what we're trying to achieve, how do we get that done? And then you break that down into all the contributing elements. Honestly, like that's where the momentum started to build, and the innovation started to happen across our teams, and the process and efficiency gains started. Well, we do it this way, but if we did it this way, I think we could do this. And leaning into automation and all of the things that you would see happening carry over from the work that we had done on sales and marketing and partnerships into the retention and expansion teams. It was really game changing. And I think that it would not have happened if I didn't have fantastic next level leadership that was owning accountability for their role in our success, and getting them aligned and talking all the time. And so I don't presume that this can all happen without incredible leadership that sits right below it. A revenue team with then functional leaders that have expertise in each one of those areas.
So I'm not going out on a limb here by saying you're a big advocate for, the CRO role that oversees, these different functions, rather than them each independently, let's say, reporting to the CEO.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously I've been in those roles where they're broken out in separate functions, and I've been able to replicate the success that we've had here without being under a single, revenue umbrella. However, the efficiencies in communication, sharing of data, in I hit my goals, I don't know why you didn't hit your goals, that like those all go away when you bring these teams together around a single plan that we are accountable for together. And I think that is probably the biggest observation that I've had in my nearly 25 years in revenue, responsible management, is marketing, I got my leads done, I hit my goals, I'm accountable for 45% of the leads to get passed over to the sales organization. And we crushed it. We had 47. But then that 53 didn't get done, and sales is sitting there saying, well, if marketing had delivered better in quality, like that
Right.
noise is very distracting for teams, and it actually means that you're not really figuring out what are the mechanics of the machine that are needing to be fine-tuned when you're just, unfortunately, I don't know what happens over there, but I did my job.
Right.
That doesn't lead to a successful growth story for anybody. And I no longer want to work in an organization where that environment is, honestly curated by the executive team and the way that they've designed the teams and the
Yeah, I was gonna
goals.
say that can't be a fun environment too when there's a lot of finger pointing and blaming.
No, no.
No, you painted a really strong picture there. So that was really cool to hear, and sounds like a wonderful place to work.
It is incredibly special. Yep.
Well, fantastic. Well, that's a great transition. I know we do 2 revenue rules, so why don't you jump in and share us your second revenue rule?
Okay, it's probably not going to be a big surprise based on what we just talked about, but I am a big believer that you need to throw out the playbook and build a culture where you lean into agility and data-driven decisions. And yes, of course, there are frameworks for how you should approach scaling a business. You don't walk in without at least, a direction on, the fundamentals that you need to assess and understand. But the last 5 years, and more importantly, the last 2 years of the pandemic, have really changed the game in really big ways. So let me share an example of what I mean. I've avoided TikTok because I'm old. I couldn't anymore. I had to be paying attention to it. It's an awareness channel and potentially a direct response channel. So I got involved, and I really enjoy it as a channel. And so in January of this year, I was flipping through the folks that I follow, and an influencer named Deanna was, there's this Dyson Airwrap that costs $700, and she had purchased this old school Conair set of heated curlers, and she filmed herself putting them in her hair and taking them out, and she was like, link up here in my bio. And she broke Conair. They sold out overnight, like more than 10,000 units. Amazon was sold out. And 2 days later, she was in conversations with Conair about working together, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get on a call with them. And I'm confident that nowhere in their plan did they have, we're going to go get Deanna to do this viral moment with us and sell out all of our units. Like, that opportunistically happened because their marketing team was paying attention and following the data and the buyers. And so that's the future of marketing, in my opinion. You start with the fundamentals, but you test and you learn and you fail and you follow where the data leads you. And with a curiosity, where are your leads coming from? Why are you churning your customers? What are the competing priorities for your ICP? What's happening in the industry that you need to be in front of? And you have to just be agile and be okay with, this is the plan, and we started down this path, and we have to go left instead of right. And that's really hard for a lot of traditional marketers, because we're so used, like the beginning of the year, we present to our board, like, here's our 2022 plan for all the things that we're going to do this year. And when you do that, you almost with blinders on aren't really listening to what's happening around you. And that's unfortunately how I think that most folks, then end up in Q2, like panicking and scrambling, because it's like, it didn't work in Q1. What did we do wrong? Where at every moment throughout that quarter, you should have been assessing, leaning in, going left instead of right, or staying the course because something is, happening that's really interesting. And, that aha moment for us at Ruby was about 18 months ago, when home services businesses, so contractors, roofers, fencing organizations, plumbers, when everybody was stuck in their houses and were like sick of looking at their walls, or they wanted to entertain in their backyard, and they're like, this is the year I'm doing it. Or plumbing problems, I can't, like all the people in the house and all the plumbing problems that came from having everybody in the house all the time. And so So we leaned in and like, who was needing us? How were they using us? What were those services that we needed to consider expanding? And our category of what we call home services, which is, anybody that, is a professional that could, support, fixing or improving your home. That's our second largest segment today. And we did that in 18 months. And had we not been paying attention and listening, because that was not the strategy that I had, thought that we needed to go down from. But as soon as we started to see some noise happen, we dug in. We looked at the data. We started going and talking to our customers. Oh my gosh, what a concept. You go talk to your customers and ask them questions to help you shape your strategy. And so that's what I think is like leaning into agility and having a structure, but not a playbook that you hold everybody accountable to, because that rigor doesn't work anymore in marketing. It just doesn't.
And so how do you get a sense for when to pull the plug on, going right instead going left? Because I think there's some smoke signals that you're hearing and seeing, and then there's maybe a leaning into it. And then you're like, okay, now it's a club beside the head. I got to go, I got to change, right? So how do you, like, with using the data, your intuition, how do you kind of process that?
Yeah, I mean, nothing should ever be done without understanding what the hypothesis is that we're trying to prove out. And so even if it is stay the steady course, it's, this is the expansion that we should expect to see from this buyer group. And so that alignment happens with a revenue operations team that is making sure that we have tracking and dashboards and reporting in place, but also, the breadcrumbs to follow what activity is happening throughout the journey and seeing where we might get stuck or maybe when we hit a wall. And so, there was some early noise that happened with auto dealerships where we were like, could this be a new market segment for us last year when we had some, folks come to us and need our services, and we dug into it and we started building out some campaigns around that. And we actually just don't do that well. The calls that they were taking aren't necessarily calls that our people, as chameleon-like as possible, could go see if a part is available in the back of their warehouse. Like it just didn't make sense for the use cases that those customers were seeking us out for, that we could do that well. And so we went down a path of exploring that and building content and trying to engage with that, and came to the conclusion that that's just not a great fit for us. And so it was, a combination of data, but also making sure that the actual needs could be met of the customer. And I think that, that's another tough one for marketing and sales organizations to honestly grapple with. Is you have your ideal customer profile, but then there's that edge of like, yes, but also we could service this because they have similar needs. And you assume without data or actual, evidence that you can meet those needs at scale. And so I think that, again, leads yourself down to, if you're not investing in revenue operations, then you can't lean into agility. Like nothing should be done without understanding what our next best action is going to look like based on what the data is telling us to do. There is also an element of instinct, and I don't want to discount that. I think there's something here, let's go try this. And many, folks have been conditioned like a failure is a bad thing. And my favorite thing is like, we tried this and it just didn't work. Awesome. What did we learn from that? And how are we going to apply that learnings to the next thing that we want to go test and understand? And so, when you have a culture of agility and you have a, framework in place that says this is what success is going to look like and this is how we're going to measure that, then you have people that are less fearful of that failure because we get to fail fast. And, I know it's this, fail fast, fail often, but you can't do that unless you understand what you're actually testing. And you have a way to measure that, and you have check-in points throughout that entire, process, and you give it enough time to make sure that you're not pulling the plug prematurely before you've even given it a chance to be successful. So again, when you have your teams talking and in constant communication and delivering feedback, that's how you can lean into this culture of agility.
I was going to say, because it seemed like an example with like the auto dealership, if you had one or two people buy and then you see their lack of success, maybe in customer success, or maybe they're asking for things that you haven't done, or you see it could be in the opposite direction where a customer is wildly successful and you just don't have many of that, right? So you need that communication coming out of the customer success teams and to shape your ICP or make those sort of agile changes. Because if they're not communicating, and it's so easy to just be, putting fires out, your local fires, right? And not, communicating across the entire team about these bigger, movements and trends that you're trying to discuss. It's, you're missing a ton of opportunity. So I can see how what we talked about originally benefits, the agility and the data-driven benefits.
All of it, and customer success operations is a function that we have in our RevOps team, and we lean into the data. What is happening in churn on the other side? Is it an indication of a product or feature gap that we need to consider? And then that goes through the product marketing assessment, process where they go talk to customers who are no longer with us, existing customers, to see how that might help them be more successful with using our services. And so this constant feedback loop across all of the revenue team. We have an onboarding team that, is accountable for successfully making sure that we can service those customers. If we get something into the onboarding team's hands from sales that isn't ready, or they thought we could do something that we can't, we have to deliver that feedback back so that we don't step into that again. As we're a high velocity organization. We sign up about 20 small businesses a day, and so it is very easy for us to have a machine going and not pay attention to the mechanics and the fundamentals that are driving that machine. And that's where we have to slow down, and we've got to always be in the data. But the data is just one part of the story. We have to talk to each other.
Right.
We have to bring our teams together and have conversations and talk about what's happening with the business and what are forward-looking indicators that we need to be in front of. And again, this is the first opportunity that I've had in my career to really bring that type of cross-functional collaboration together. I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years, this is how organizations start to think about, really eclipsing their wildest dreams in terms of what their growth and potential could look like if they were to, really break down the silos even more by aligning teams around a single set of targets and goals.
Wow. No, that's fantastic. I love that. Some of the stories you shared, I think that really does bring to life. It's not just, you sharing kind of on a soapbox, but you can show with examples of how that's really, connecting both from a sales, marketing standpoint, and then to the CS, and how that all really does connect. Because if I can just imagine, if you're in a silo and you're not talking to the other teams, there's so much friction sometimes, or just lack of knowledge of what's going on. Like one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and therefore you're so late to the game, so you can't be agile to make the quick maneuvers, right? So you may be more prone to these bigger swings, maybe not as good, but just as bad, right? If you're unable to pick up trends as fast, right? Good or bad, you miss stuff.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's always around the untapped potential. So I think that folks have an idea of how to get from point A to point B, and again, like the traditional playbook of here's our funnel and these are how things move down the funnel, and approaching it from that way misses those critical opportunities to drive innovation in the way that people move through your buying cycle, or from a retention and expansion perspective, how customers stay loyal to you and are potentially a great source of referrals for you.
Right.
Our customers love us, and small businesses talk to each other, of course they do, within their communities, and we have customers that are like, Bob's Plumbing Service referred me to you, how do I get started? And my marketing customer acquisition cost is basically zero for that customer. That you deliver exceptional service. One of our core values is practice wowism, which means we don't want you to just say that was good or great. We want you to have a wow moment. And when we wow our customers, they talk about it. And I think that's how small businesses are run, but that's also the community environment that we deeply feel connected to, is Again, that's the thing that keeps me up at night is how do we find more small businesses and provide services that change their success outcomes.
I love that. Practice wowisms. So that's great. I love that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Tell us, Rebecca, how we can follow you. Where can we connect with you online?
Yeah, probably the easiest way is on LinkedIn. I'm on a lot of other social media platforms, but usually stalker, but I'm very active on LinkedIn. I think that there's a lot of great conversation that's happening there. So look me up, Rebecca Grimes with Ruby, and you will find me there.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for taking the time to come and share some of your story. I think you should start a big conversation across marketing and sales and CS teams, even in the CEO office. As they talk about how to put together a team to achieve some of the outcomes that you and the team at Ruby have achieved. So thank you for sharing that, and come back soon.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is a great conversation.
All right, we'll talk soon. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to The Revenue Hustle. This episode has been brought to you by 9 Lenses. Close more deals with interactive assessments. Check them out at 9lenses.com. See you next time.